We are on the eve of spring practice there at South Carolina. We bring in Will Gunter from the all-new early game on 107.5 The Game to talk up the Gamecocks. Will, how you doing today? Or should I
Doing great.
be asking?
Doing great. Actually, on a little bit of a trip here down in Tampa this week for a wedding. So, mixing a little bit of pleasure with business this morning.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time out here. So, the South Carolina offensive line is going to be key, as it is with every football team, but especially with this young group coming together. Spring practice, typically a time for offensive line coaches to mix and match. So, it's not just about getting the best 5 players out there, but the best unit out there. And you had a chance to catch up with a few of the linemen this week.
Yeah, and, South Carolina held kind of a spring media day, and we had the opportunity to talk to a lot of players. And as you mentioned, the offensive line was without a doubt last year the biggest disappointment for South Carolina going in to a season with a lot of uncertainty on offense as they were replacing or they were looking for a quarterback, Perry Orth or Brandon McElwain. They were trying to find a running back there. They were hoping David Williams would step up. There was a lack of proven receivers. And so the offensive line last year was expected to be the strength of the team, and it turns out they weren't. They gave up 41 sacks on the season, 24 of them just to Jake Bentley alone. And it was a group that never really got going. Now, they had some good rushing games late in the season, but it's a group that was very maligned. Sean Elliott takes off now to Georgia State to be the head coach there, and in comes Eric Wolford. And so having the opportunity to speak with some of those guys, Corey Helms in particular was one guy last year that played through an injury, a meniscus tear that he kind of battled through, and it really set him back. He seems healthy and ready to go. And a guy to keep an eye on, Donnell Stanley. Had a chance to talk with him on Wednesday afternoon. And this was a big-time recruit. Chose South Carolina over Florida, LSU, Alabama, a lot of big offers. He's out of Atlanta, South Carolina. He got injured on the opening play of the Vanderbilt game last year, the opening play of the season, and played the remainder of the series. He played about 10 plays of the season with a very bad, maybe even a cracked ankle, but a very bad ankle sprain. They actually got him a medical red shirt. He is expected back. So I talked to those two on Wednesday afternoon, and there's a lot of excitement. New offensive line coach Eric Wolford, they talk about him teaching technique, a different technique than what they've been doing and dealing with over the last few years. So it will be a big spring for the offensive line, and certainly we're going to get into the positions and some moves that Eric Wolford is already putting into place with spring practice set to start tomorrow, Saturday the 25th. But certainly it's going to be a big spring. If there's a unit on the South Carolina football team that has to have a good spring to any unit, offense or defense, it's the offensive line.
Okay, when we talk about a team that averaged 348 yards total offense, that was number 115 in the country. We've got 128 FBS teams. The situation not much better rushing the football. You mentioned that it did improve late in the season. 108th rushing last season. We'll get to the running backs here soon, but the offensive line is obviously a line in the SEC. You need to move people out of the way. You need to protect the quarterback. Who are some of the people in place, and where do they stand at this point?
Well, the way South Carolina's recruited has been good and bad. I think there is talented players across the line for Eric Wolford to work with. The problem is there are a lot of interior guys. I don't think they did a good job recruiting athletes. So when you look at the interior of the line, and when I say athletes, I'm talking about to play the tackle position, and we'll get to that. But I think when you look at the interior of the line, there's a lot of good players to work with. You start with Corey Helms, who I just mentioned, and Alan Knott, both of who started a lot of games. Alan Knott at center, Corey Helms at one of the guard spots last year. Those are players that at least bring back a lot of experience. Corey Helms was actually a freshman All-American at Wake Forest, and I mentioned played through an injury last year, but is a big, strong kid. Then they're going to move DJ Park, a senior now, back inside. He's bounced around, he's played guard, he's played tackle, but he's a big kid. He's better suited for the interior of the line. He's going to be there. I think he's a guy who potentially wins a starting spot. Keep an eye on, again, is going to be Donnell Stanley, the big-time recruit. Donnell Stanley started the first game last year and then was out. So I think those 4 guys are the 4 guys that we're going to talk about to keep an eye on. And we'll get to one of the tackles who can come back in, Zach Bailey, in a minute, who's going to right tackle for the spring. But between those 4 guys, you got to pick 3 of them. My guess, my feeling, is that when all things are said and done, that you could very well see DJ Park at one guard spot, Corey Helms at the center spot, and Donnell Stanley at another guard spot. And I'll be honest, that group right there on paper is a really, really good interior group of offensive linemen, with Alan Knott factoring in there somewhere. There's a walk-on Chandler Farrell that may back up at center a little bit, and then they've got some other redshirt freshmen that I doubt we'll hear much from. But when you talk about names, there are four guys that stand out immediately based on what we know, and that's going to be Corey Helms, Donnell Stanley, DJ Park, and Alan Knott.
So, Will, you touch upon something that we see play out at the NFL draft and as offensive linemen start their NFL careers, but the same holds true in the transition from high school football to college football. Some guys you look at and you test them in the drills, and you can see that guy's a guard. He's played guard. He will always be a guard. Hopefully he becomes a really good one. Other guys you project to be tackles, but they step up, especially to the speed of the SEC, and they're not tackles at that level, even though you thought that they were going to be tackles. And you talk about the dilemma of having strong interior line play, but finding those more specialty offensive linemen that can get out on the edge, block plays, and obviously drop back in their stances and protect the quarterback in the pocket. And so it sounds like there may be some issues there.
There will be. We'll see. So one of the guys that was on the interior last year that I did not just mention is Zach Bailey. And Zach Bailey from Somerville is projected as the best offensive lineman on South Carolina's football team. He was, without a doubt, he was last year at the right guard spot. They're going to shift him out, 6'5", about 310 pounds. They're going to shift him out this spring and let him compete at the right tackle position. Because, again, one thing that's been a mistake or that's been messed up has been the fact that Sean Elliott did not recruit enough athleticism at the guard at the tackle position. You saw a lot of guys that they would bring in that would end up having to, as you just mentioned, go inside and play a guard. Christian Pellage is a name I didn't mention because I don't know how he'll factor in this coming season in that interior line. But Christian Pellage was brought in, and a lot of people penciled him in as a future tackle. Well, not athletic enough to play the tackle position. Is going to have to go to the interior. He could end up being really, really good on the interior, but, you know, again, like you just said, athleticism. So when we look at the tackles, Zach Bailey is the most interesting offensive lineman this spring because you know what he can do at the guard position. You know he's going to be an EC performer at the guard position, but now they're going to try him at right tackle, because they've got to find somebody for that position. He'll compete this spring with Blake Camper, another tackle who's actually played some there. He had an injury last year. Camper is a kid who could give them some time. So that's your right tackle position. Your left tackle position, South Carolina has to replace Mason Zandy, who was started there last year. They're going to try a redshirt freshman, Cedarius Hutcherson, who Will Muschamp talked about on Wednesday in his press conference, arrived at South Carolina at 245 pounds. He, in a year, is now 310 pounds. You're talking a pretty significant weight gain there, about 75 pounds. So he's going to be a guy competing for that. And then the right tackle, another right tackle from last year, Malik Young, who, again, probably projects better on the interior. But when you're trying to find your best athletes, he's going to try the left tackle position. Cedarius Hutcherson, from what I've been told, maybe the best athlete amongst the offensive linemen. So they're going to try him at left tackle. But, again, you're dealing with a redshirt freshman. You see that can be a little difficult. So the tackle position is very unsettled. They do have some guys coming in the summer in this part of this. Dennis Daly is a guy that stands out, a junior college prospect, and some freshmen, Jordan Carty and Jordan Rhodes, who could very well project there. But the spring is going to be interesting in terms of finding tackles.